Good to go?
Sure.
All right. Well, I'll just go in here. All right. No objections. Perfect. All right. So good day, everybody listening. In case you're watching, no, I am not Hugh Maynard. You probably know that already. My name's Matt McIntosh, and I'm going to be your wonderful narrator this afternoon. Thanks for tuning into the Right Rate webinar. Get things rolling in a second. Just a reminder, while our lovely guests are speaking, it's probably best if we just keep things on mute, just to make sure we're not being too interrupted too much. If you have questions as we proceed, if possible, send them through the text interface. I'll try and keep track of them, and we can cover them at the end. We'll have Bern and Allison each give a little spiel first, and then we'll have kind of a discussion together. And Bern and Allison being our speakers, I'd like to thank them for taking the time to connect this afternoon. Their bios were in a couple of email blasts that we sent out in the NIB and other places, but I'll just give you a little overview of them real quick in case you're not familiar with these two folks. Allison's freelancer and an editor from Atlantic, Canada, 25 years experience working in ag. She's a partner with Cultivating Communications, has produced work for clients, including FCC, AAFC, Canadian Cattlemen Country Guide, and more. She is an active member of the Atlantic Farm Writers Federation, CFWF, and IFAJ. So she does a lot of traveling as well. Bernard Tobin, my friend from a little bit closer to where I live, down in Essex County, specializes in ag and food communications. He's a writer and a journalist, and has also worked for two of Canada's leading agricultural communications firms. He's in his role as Ontario field editor for realagriculture.com. He covers a wide range of ag issues and leads the production of Real Ag's corn, soybean, and wheat schools. He also works as a consultant, the Guelph-based Synthesis Ag Network, and continues to lead numerous communications workshops and training sessions for organizations such as Farm and Food Care. So thanks to you both for being here. I do appreciate it, and I hope everyone else does too. And yeah, the right rate. Rates are a tough thing. I can certainly say, starting out as a freelancer and continuing as a freelancer, it's probably one of the toughest things I have to deal with, and I know other people do as well. So, Bern, would you like to take it away?
I will kick it off. Thank you, Matt. And thanks everybody for joining us. Forgive me, I'm a little cold, and every now and then I'll try to keep that under wraps. But the rate discussion is age old, and a lot of people basically do it differently. And what I'm going to do is share my approach to it. And it's not necessarily a rate. It's more about as I like to say, it's about experience, knowledge, skills, and which adds up to value. And I basically bill people based on, I think, the value that I can provide them. And so my rate is really structured on that. And I broke out on my own about 10 years ago and started freelancing. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my history for a second, and about how I got to freelancing, because it's a really important part of the rate structure. So so I'm a farm boy from Newfoundland, I like to say. Not a lot of us around. But I grew up on a dairy farm in Newfoundland. Went to came to Toronto, went to Ryerson Journalism School, and then got into the ag media. Worked for about 7 or 8 years for Farm and Country newspaper. So I was a feature writer and the editor. Sat on the desk, did the news and the feature editing, and basically put together the whole publication. So really got a sense of how that came together, and worked with a lot of freelancers, hired a lot of people. That publication sort of ended, and it was sort of like the forerunner of better farming. I went on to the agency business. So I worked for 2 agencies and really got a good sense of the other side of the table, shall we say. Did a lot of work in public relations, marketing, advertising, and through that, through my journalism experience, got to write about a lot of different things, from politics to public policy to crop technology, and on and on and on. So again, accumulating experience. And in the advertising, in the agency world, as I say, got to do a lot of corporate communications, working with a lot of senior people. And so again, how to communicate, you know, messaging and various other things. And that sort of brought me out of there about a few years, about 7 or 8 years ago. I joined Real Agriculture after I left the agency business. And that's, I started building my freelance business. So I hooked on with realagriculture.com, Sean Haney's group, and started working with him. And then I started piecing together other clients. So basically these days, what I do, I write feature stories. I travel through Real Agriculture, go to a lot of trade shows, record a lot of videos. I'm out in the field with farmers creating, as I think Matt said, the corn, soy, wheat field, wheat programs for Real Agriculture. You know, doing a lot of video production for some of the other clients I have. And I'm doing on air. So I'm actually producing the videos. I'm in front of the camera. I'm writing scripts, doing a lot of social media, doing radio programs with contributing to Real Agriculture Radio. And then I have a whole consulting side. So I, with Synthesis Agri-Food Network, do coaching, training. We do a lot of consulting and media relations. I do a lot of media training with Farm and Food Care, for example, Ontario. So I have done, and I try to do just about everything. And so that leads, as I say, going back to that experience, knowledge, skills equals value approach to setting a rate. So I like to think I bring a lot to the table. I can walk into an organization. I think I like to think I could get bits with anybody at any level about anything in agriculture, as I say, from corporate relations to you know, public policy, all the way down to how to kill a weed, and which is a big business for a lot of the agricultural clients we work with. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about how I structured the business from a freelancer perspective. It's difficult, sort of, it's a challenge if you've got a lot of little things, you know, pulling together. And I think we all know that there's a lot of people pulling at you. So that's a difficult challenge. So what I like to do is I basically built my own little model, agency model. And that is, you know, I like an anchor client. And then you can build things around it. And there's plenty of value to that. I'll talk about in a bit. But my anchor client really is Real Agriculture. I contract half of my time to Real Agriculture, and so 50% of my time. So, which is really neat, and that's a great outfit. We do a lot of fun things. We go to a lot of places, meet a lot of people. I just got back from the National Farm Machinery Show, 3 days in Kentucky. You meet a lot of people. You know, you're seen. It's great for your business, and you know, it's great to do Real Agriculture business, but it's a great part. It's great for me as a freelancer. I get to connect with a lot of people as well. And we do all those skills that we talked about and bring that back home. And then around that, so from a rate perspective, I'll talk about that in a second. And then I build a whole bunch of clients, and those include the Synthesis Agri-Food Network and a bunch of people I write for. So I typically have, you know, 6, 7, 8 clients rolling at any one time. And as I say, it varies from writing stories to you know, shooting video and everything in between, and all the Real Agriculture stuff I do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So Real Agriculture, for example, I don't have a rate. Basically what I did is I basically, we have an agreement on a contract on a flat rate. And basically, you know, that allows me to do so much more. And because they're contracting so much of my time, half of my time, you know, I'm not billing them an hourly rate. I'm basically saying, okay, how much is half of my time worth? And, you know, I mean, for example, I could establish a rate of $50, $60, $70, $80 an hour. I can't bill those folks that rate. But what I can do is say, okay, if you want to buy a bunch of my time and we can agree on a rate, we do. So that's what we do. And I think that's benefit to me. It's benefit to Real Agriculture too. You know, they have a lot of flexibility with the things I can do. And then, you know, I work with the other clients based on, as I say, the experience, knowledge, and skills value that I bring, plus an understanding of the project. And you know, a lot of times I just don't talk specifically about hourly rates. I talk about the project, and I think for freelancers, it's key to understand the project. That's the most important thing, and that is, you know, what is the request, what is the objective, you know, how much research do you need to do, how many interviews do you need to do for a feature story, for example, you know, what's the approval process, how many people are going to be involved, and whether travel and expense is involved, and we'll talk about that as well. So that way I put together, you know, basically, this is going to take me a day, it's going to take me 2 days, it's going to take me whatever, and I can bill a budget. Excuse me. And you know, for different things, you're going to charge different rates. I mean, like when I'm out shooting video, I'm bringing a skill, I'm bringing equipment, I'm, you know, bringing something else. So my rate might be higher on that. And when I'm teaching, for example, you know, course, or doing media training and stuff like that, or doing any communications training, you know, I think there's a lot of value in that. It's a higher value, it's a teaching value. So my rate would be higher for that. So, I mean, like, and so rate wise, I mean, you can be anywhere between like $50 and $250, you know, depending on what it is and what the value you're presenting is. So that's pretty much the rate structure. And again, real agriculture wouldn't fall into that. And some of my other, and again, when I look at a project, is it a bulk buy, shall we say? Is it a big job? And how it might fit into some other things I'm doing. I want to talk about travel as well. People always say, hey, Vern, you're going to spend 6 hours in a car getting to do a shoot or getting somewhere. What are you going to charge me for that? So typically I do have a travel rate. Basically it's half to, you know, maybe a little bit more than that of what the actual rate is, because yeah, I'm sitting in a car or I'm traveling somewhere, I'm on a plane. I'm not actually doing a whole lot. A lot of times I'm preparing, but I charge a different rate for that because we spend most of our times in the plane prepping for a job. But it's opportunity cost. If I wasn't on a plane or in a car driving 3 or 4 hours to a shoot, I could be doing something else. I could be working for someone else and doing something right. So I always do work in a travel rate. And that's something I put in there because of the opportunity cost. Mileage, we'll build that out as well. And we will, again, we'll build that out and present it to the client. Again, I'd like to say understanding the project is most important. A couple of other things that I would mention as well is, you know, I guess getting the budget, getting the agreement up front. And when you're working on a project as well, stay in communication. If things go all over and above, you want to have that communication. You want to have that conversation is because the budget may get higher based on, and because you're doing hours and you want those need to be accumulated. As I say, I try not to, if you do a good budget, you should be able to hit the mark. But things change, as we all know. Jobs get bigger, things get, you know, things change. What else would I want to talk about? But just being a freelancer, I think don't undervalue yourself. I mean, we all know that newsrooms are shrinking. They're smaller. We also know that, you know, whether it's a corporation or an association or whomever you work with, you know, they need to write, they need to communicate. It's tremendous value. Sometimes they don't have those people on staff, and it costs a lot of money to keep those people on staff. So if you can bring that value, that commitment, that quality, those skills, knowledge, you know, you shouldn't be doing it for $10, $15, $20 an hour. You know, there's some work I just don't do because, you know, I just can't justify it. And but you know, again, I've been able to structure my business. So as I say, I've got a big client and it's something I love working with Real Agriculture. and that sort of allows me to do a lot of other things. So that's a pretty cool way. What else I want to talk about? Terms of payment and stuff like that. You know, it's tough when you have a lot of different people working, well, different clients. Payment's always important. You know, you want to have good cash flow and stuff like that, and you don't want to have to go to a line of credit and to keep things flowing. But that's fine. Some people, that's the way a lot of businesses work. But I like to have some clients that pay immediately, and that really helps with the cash flow. And I have a good group of that. But there are some clients who have situations where they need POs. It'll take longer times to get paid, 60 days or more sometimes. So you need to work with those people. A lot of those people are really good. They understand your situation, and maybe they'll issue you your, they'll add bill on time, get the invoice in. Sometimes they'll even deposit it into the system when the PO is offered. So that squeezes things up. But, those are some things to consider. I'm not going to talk too much longer because I know Allison's ready to go and she's going to talk a lot more about different things. But, I just think when it comes to rates, it really is about, value, and have confidence in the skills and the knowledge and the experience that you bring. Don't sell yourself short. I think you got to sell yourself. I like the fact that when you can walk into an organization, you may know the people, you may be able to, as I say, talk to them about their issues at the level. Again, whether it's a technical issue on science and in their products, or it's a communications issue, and you understand that issue with them, and you can bring different nuances and help them communicate it effectively. That's value. And that needs to be factored into your rates. Sometimes you accumulate that knowledge and over time. But if you do good work, you should have a solid rate. And as I say, it varies for different people, different things. It can be anywhere from $50 to $200 or $300. It all depends on what you're doing, who you're doing it for, and again, the value you provide. I've got lots of other things to say. You're probably getting tired of me. I'm just going to quit for right now and maybe turn it back to Matt. How's that sound, Matt?
That works, Bern. Thank you for that. I guess, again, just a reminder, if people have questions they want to ask as they go through, if you have the ability and you can type them in, I'll save them. We can run through them together at the end. And otherwise, we'll go with Allison for now. Bern, thanks again. Allison, you good to go?
I am good to go. Yeah, so what Bern said, I don't know, he said Allison had a lot more to say. I just agree with Bern. So I started, actually, apparently I need to update my bio from wherever you guys grabbed it from, Matt, because it's 30 years ago that I graduated. So
I was trying to be kind.
Thanks. So yeah, and I pretty much, as soon as I graduated from college, I studied journalism. I was pretty much freelancing. I used to write for the provincial paper in New Brunswick, the Telegraph Journal, and I think I was there about a year or so before I switched over to the Daily Gleaner newspaper, which is based out of Fredericton. All the same company because we're New Brunswick, but still that sense of competition amongst the newspapers. And I was a freelancer. I was a stringer, so I wrote about anything and everything that was happening. So I was doing accidents, and I was doing court, and I was doing village council and town council and school board. And because I lived in Woodstock, New Brunswick, and I was about 30 minutes away from the world headquarters for McCain Foods, I was writing about agriculture. Not that I knew anything about agriculture. I'm sure most of you have heard me tell the story about I went to Centerville, New Brunswick to a potato meeting, and I was like 20 and just graduated and went in early, got at the front of the room, and the room filled in behind me. and it was a research meeting, and they started talking about tubers, and I thought, oh my God, I'm at the wrong meeting. It's supposed to be a potato meeting. So, but you know, agriculture, farmers are a really good group to learn from. So over the years, I worked in Woodstock for 12 years, and over those years, you know, you learn to recognize when you walk into the room who will teach you and who will sit down and share their information with you. So we had the opportunity, my husband and I, to move from Woodstock, New Brunswick to just before I get there, like, so as I was writing these potato stories and I was writing, you know, just agriculture meetings, they were part of the community. I started writing for Heather Jones at Farm Focus. So that was an opportunity to sort of divert and learn more about agriculture. So yeah, so then I was in Woodstock for 12 years. We moved to Moncton, New Brunswick, so on the other side of the province. And it was just sort of a time to reevaluate and figure out how, I mean, obviously I can't cover Woodstock Village Council from, you know, 3 hours away. So just sort of figuring out what I was going to do with my business. And I sat down with a group of freelance writers, and we went through the process of building our business plan, basically. And we started with, okay, how much do we want to make in a year? What's our target income? And how much time do I want off for summer vacation? And how much do I want to take off at Christmas vacation? And then just sort of saying, okay, like, how many hours a day do I want to work? Do I want to be off at 2 o'clock when my kids are little and finished at school and walk over to the school and pick them up? Do I want to work 3 days a week and have them home the other days? And just figuring that out and sort of using that formula to come up with an hourly rate, but also taking into account not necessarily this is how long it takes me to write a story, but looking at, you know, CPP deductions and, you know, all my non-billable hours and the value in those. So we put together this this formula and this business plan, which, you know, set the goal and then gave us the path to reach that goal. So yeah, I don't know, that was sort of the path that it came on. And, you know, through knowing Heather Jones, you know, by default, I was on the organizing committee for the 2001 CFWF conference in Fredericton, which we postponed for a year because of 9/11. And, you know, by that time, I guess at the same time I you know, focused and made this business plan, it was also at the same time where I decided that I needed to find a niche. And there was, at that time, no one in Atlantic Canada writing about agriculture, or very few of us. So I decided that I would make that my niche and really market myself that way. So then, you know, along came CFWF in Fredericton. I went to Kelowna the following year, and I've been going ever since. And, you know, through that made the connections to, you know, Farm Credit. And that's where that contract came, and moved in as a writer. And then eventually when Kevin Hirsch stepped back from the editor's job of FCC Express, I moved into that role. So yeah, that's how we got here. And, you know, really a lot of what Bern took my speech, so it's okay. Do we want to go back to Matt?
All right there, Allison.
Okay.
Oh, was that?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, well, we can, unless you had another, can I just ask, I guess, is there anything you could speak to regarding the difference between your work as in like editorship as opposed to the freelancer that's actually submitting the articles? Like, is there something that you can touch on that maybe that isn't considered per se by one particular side of that or the other?
Yeah, I heard editors, like it was a professional development session that I went to of a panel of editors, and they said that inside every editor is a frustrated writer, because, you know, you really miss that. Like, and certainly as my career evolved, as my work with FCC evolved, I got less away from writing and more into editing. And and even as my business continued to evolve, I do less, I do editing now is pretty much the majority of my time, but also we've evolved into project management. So through my work with, it's probably been maybe 7 or 8 years. So Trudy Kelly Forsyth is, so we've been friends for like ever. And we decided that we would start marketing ourselves together rather than individually, and then open up that opportunity to say, you know what, we can take on bigger jobs because there's 2 of us. And we also were confident that we had a large enough network of colleagues that if we needed a graphic designer, we could subcontract to a graphic designer or video or whatever. So that was, we opened up the opportunity to do that. So collectively we are cultivating communications. And so one of our major contract with that is the Canadian Foraging Grassland Association. So we started doing communications for them, and that evolved into, it's really funny how jobs evolve. That evolved into planning their conference. So, but basically it evolved because we were getting increasingly involved with the conference organizers that we had. And then there comes a point where it's just like, you know what, it's probably easier to do it ourselves. And, you know, so then we make that presentation and make that sales pitch and move forward from there. So probably, well, I would say 80% of my time is with Farm Credit Canada, and then 20% of my time is with CFGA. That moves around a lot. Right now, my responsibilities with CFGA and the conference planning are pretty minimal because the conference is in November. You know, Trudy is looking after other elements of that contract, and she's pretty intense with that work right now, and that will shift as time goes over and as time goes on and we get closer to the conference. So, you know, I'm looking at booking the hotel right now, you know, so I'm there, but it's not a huge, it's there and it's important, but it's not, you know, the rush of putting the program together that will happen, you know, in the month before the conference. So it's a sliding scale as far as that work goes. It's still 80% FCC. So that also involves, you know, I may not be working evenings now, but as it gets closer to the conference, as you know, everybody on the call probably has organized conferences, that time investment increases.
Okay, perhaps I got one more for you, Allison, and then maybe we can all just kind of chat together here. To give a bit of a window view into kind of, I guess, the editorial office. So let's say it's for FCC, the ideas that are generated in that office, or any, let's say, constraints that, I mean, I've submitted some stuff to you before. Sometimes for the, let's say, again, the Express articles are very short, so there's a constraint. But on the editorial side of that, what kind, like, is there something that you can kind of tell someone that may not have had that experience, what goes on in that meeting, like what sort of things, how things get thrown around idea wise, why that, you know, something, why it's supposed to be a certain size or longer or shorter, anything to that?
Well, I guess broadly speaking, you know, behind every editor is a whole publication, right? So, and with that, the values and the beliefs that organization brings. So, you know, I think that's important to remember when you are dealing with an editor, that, I don't know, like even if I think about topics from when I worked with the Brunswick News Organization in New Brunswick. So the daily papers, there are 3 major daily papers in New Brunswick. They're all owned by the same company. Over the last, say 15 years or so, all of the weekly newspapers in New Brunswick have been purchased by the same organization. So basically it's the Irving Company. They own all of the media in New Brunswick, or all of the newspapers. So I was never really told, don't write about clear cutting, but it was sort of an understood, that you don't, there's certain no-go topics. And I think that, it's just as a writer, it's important to remember that your story idea may get turned down, not necessarily because it just may not be the right fit for that publication. There could be other, reasons behind the editor saying no.
So like writing about avoiding taxes for a crown corporation, that sort of idea.
Yeah, probably wouldn't fly with FCC.
Okay, well, I guess Bern, if you want to pop back on here as well, I have a few questions.
Fire away.
All right. So first one, question is, does anyone have a sliding scale for NFP, or does that devalue your work?
NFP.
I believe that came from our Syngenta friends, and clarification, not for profit. Sorry,
Oh.
that's what they meant.
I should know, sorry. Does it devalue my work, or I'm sorry. I'm trying to. Basically, I think, I go back to, that value equation, and, I don't do a lot of not-for-profit work. I do volunteering and various other things, but I don't, when it comes to my work, I haven't done a lot of that. Sometimes I will contribute and help out some organizations about, and providing my skills, but, I typically don't sort of undervalue myself. Basically, I have as I say, I've been around this business for a long time. I think I've accumulated enough skills, and there's just things I just decide I don't want to do. And I've gotten to the point where, when it comes to real agriculture, for example, it's a great opportunity for me. I don't bill them an hourly rate. I don't charge them as much, but they give me a lot of work. They take me places. They give me great opportunities. So it's a great relationship. And I get to learn a lot. And I get, it's profile, it's all those things. So I get to sort of build off of that for my own business. And, and I think I bring a lot to the table for those folks as well, in what I've been doing. So it's not for me a sliding scale. It really is about value. And, my rates don't move a lot for different clients. It's pretty much set. Where the rates changes when, when you are, if you're writing a feature story, that's one thing. But if you've been asked to put together a corporate training exercise for a group of people, and you're delivering significant value, it's a lot of times it's been built specifically to deal with their issue or their needs, very customized. It's a lot of prep that goes into that, and so those hours need to get sort of rolled into it. So that will sort of, as I say, build the value of that, and because it takes a lot more to create, and it's customized and stuff like that. So you don't have to put that into a feature story or a specific video. That can go into more just standard development.
So I have heard of some freelance writers who pick their charity or not-for-profit and will do volunteer work like communications work or writing for them. And one really valuable tip that I've heard is to, when you do that, to get an income tax receipt. Like when you make a donation to whatever, get a tax receipt for that, and because then you can claim that in your income tax at the end of the year. So that's something to consider as well.
Right. Cool. We got another question here, and specifically about what are the going rates? I know, well, I'm sure all of us know that there's a wide range, but what are, if there are standard, what are the going rates by word? Is it 30 cents, 40 cents, less than that, more than that? And in terms of photos, what's the going rate for photos?
Allison, I don't know if you know much about that. I've never written a story based on words in my life. I'll be quite honest with you. If $1 a word, $50 a word, or whatever. I basically looked at a feature story and say, hey, yeah, it's 800 words. It's going to take me this. I talked about it earlier. People I've got to interview, things I've got to do, the research I've got to do, and I put my number on it. And hopefully it matches. If someone's paying words, it matches.
Mhm.
As for photos, I don't know. I don't sell a lot of photos. Maybe Allison, you might buy some and do some.
I don't buy photos, I find that the per word rate, I know it's what we're presented with as freelance writers. That's usually how payment is presented. But I also find it's counterintuitive because, it's our job to write good, clean, tight copy. So, I don't know because I do the same thing. If I was writing a story, I would quote on it as a package sort of thing. And yeah.
Does it seem, and this, whether this can be answered or not, does it seem though that perhaps things have shifted that way more so recently than they used to be? Compared to you folks, I know I'm relatively new in comparison, and so I'm not sure, but is it more, do you find that that's being requested more by editorial teams to look for a kind of a package amount, or is there still a tendency to want to go with that per word?
I think the tendency is to go per word. And you can also sort of take that per word, I don't know, let's have some fun and get a bunch of writers on a webinar to do some math. But I don't know, 25 cents a word, 500 words, right? So whatever that works out to be. So it goes back to your hourly rate and your business plan and what you've decided that this is my target annual income and this is how, whatever that formula that is used to determine what your hourly rate is. Maybe the story, if the editor gives you so I've been in a position recently where when I've been assigning stories, a lot of they're pretty easy stories to write, except for the one that you're working on now, Matt. But they're pretty easy stories to write. Here are 2 contacts. Here are their phone numbers and their email addresses. This is the angle I want, and this is how many words you have. So really, that's so if it takes you, 2 or 3 hours to write the story, then maybe your hourly rate is being met. So I think you could take that per word rate and sort of figure out how long it is going to take you, like Bern said, and then see if that matches up.
So if I had a 750 word story, I wouldn't just say, okay, that's going to work out to exactly this much. I would say, I think it's going to take that amount of time.
And
and the only thing it all kinds depends on who you're writing for. If you're writing for an editorial publication, as Allison said, it's a couple hours, couple of calls, but also factor in whether it's someone wants to read it and give you feedback and ask you to do more and go back and get some approvals and you're chasing people and stuff like that. So again, look at the whole development process, and whether you got to get out and drive places or meet people and stuff like that. So again, for me, the word thing is difficult because I can write, to your point, Allison, I can write a 1,200 word story on 2 phone calls, or I can spend weeks researching things, talking to people, chasing people, and then we liaisoning with clients and stuff like that. It just blow the hell out of the budget. So you really got to understand what's involved for that end product, not necessarily the words.
Okay, sorry, Allison, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to probably answer your next question. So from an editor's point of view, so with what I do with FCC is we have a set rate for the stories. But I also am cognizant of there are stories that are like 1,200 words and just blow the budget out of the water. So I think that's where, the writers that I work with, we develop a relationship. I know most of my writers fairly well, and we've developed that relationship over time. So we have a good trust, right? So I would expect, I sincerely expect that if a writer was working on a story for me and we had agreed on the rate, and sometimes it just doesn't go the right way, or it's news, right? Or it's you're talking with people, you don't know exactly what they're going to say, and the story goes off the rails or it goes in a completely different direction. I want to know that as the editor, and I also want to know that the budget did blow up, and this is taking me a lot longer than I thought it would, and can we look at the payment rate? And I think that's only fair. I mean, really, the worst an editor will say is no. And, but if in that kind of a situation, if the budget does go crazy, then to go back to the editor and just say, listen, this is way more work than I expected it to be. Can we look at the rate again? Doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, communication is key. And I hope most of them stay on the rails, but every now and then you've got to have those conversations.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. I got another question here from a colleague in Calgary. And for someone who's just starting out, how can someone who's just a few years into a career of agriculture writing sell themselves with less experience? Should that affect rate? And I guess it obviously applies to you both here, but that's certainly a big question. So you talk about building trust with an editor or an organization. It takes time. When you first get into it, that's a pretty daunting task. So how did you guys get past that? What was some maybe successful approaches that you found?
I'm old. I can't remember when I was young. So it's tough. But, as I say, I started as a journalist. I worked as a journalist for 8 years. Before then I went to the agency business. So again, I had a chance to sort of develop the skill and get into an agency. And, when you work for an agency, they evaluate your ability and they slot you in and they build you out at that rate. But what I say people is just, I think people are coming out of, young people, tremendously skilled. Do your research, write good stories. And you'll quickly, you got to earn some trust, right? I mean, Allison will talk about the relationships she has with people. And I think if you do good work, look around, understand the publication, understand what they need, understand what they like, or whether it's an agency or whatever job you're doing, and do good work. And then you can quickly establish your level of skill, of value. And then once you're established, you can, then you can start really quickly moving it up. But remember, as I said earlier, I mean, that value rate is, you should find it, and it shouldn't be too low, because, if you can write a good story, do effective communications, you have value, and, just set that establishment and start moving up from there, and build one relationship, make some more connections, and I think you can get to based on your abilities, you can get there into a nice spot pretty quickly.
Yeah, my first reaction was, no, don't adjust your rate. But I also think you have to look at it, if you were staff someplace, those at the entrance level would tend to have a lower annual income than those at who have been there for more years. So, but again, I think it goes back around to that formula of determining what's your target income, and then setting it from, going from there, and find your niche. It actually wasn't until I became involved with IFAJ, the International Federation of Agricultural Journalists, and started going to the conferences, that all of a sudden the whole world has opened up to you, and you realize that there are some journalists, agricultural journalists, who are very specific in sectors. So dairy or beef or crops or, that sort of thing. And so maybe it's a matter of finding your niche and finding your specialty in those areas. And, I think like breaking in and starting out, there can't be enough said for networking and just getting to know those in the industry. I know that if you were to I've been going to the Canadian Farm Writers Conferences since 2001 and 2002. There's never been anyone who stands up at the front of the room and says, hey, I'm looking for writers. But if you're there and you're talking to everybody and you're meeting everyone, then there are people there who are looking for writers. You just need to talk to everyone. One time a freelancer said to me that if he does not make his money back from going to CFWF within 2 months after the conference, then he hasn't worked hard enough while he's there. So the opportunities are there.
Yeah, and I just want to add on to Alison's point about, hey, specializing. I mean, whether it's horticulture, whether it's dairy, whether it's crops, whether it's anything, there's lots of niches in there to sort of get in and start sort of, building on anything specific that you bring. Or if you want to invest in a particular, industry and sort of get really in the know, go to some conferences, meet some people, CFWF, on and on and on. And, I will tell you, I won't tell you the year I graduated, by my first 3 job offers out of Ryerson Journalism School. I think I was offered $17,000 annual, $21,000 and $24,000. So that was, so typically when you do start young, you do have to start at a lower level and make the grade. But if you have the skills, you can make the grade. That was 25, 30 years ago.
The other part too, just one more point on that. Don't limit yourself to your province or your town or your country. There is a whole world of agricultural publications out there. And, if you can write in a second language, even better, but there's a lot of English publications out there. So, and a lot of them are interested in what's going on in Canada. So those are markets to look into as well. And, it's kind of nice to get a check in US dollars than Canadian.
All right, cool. I actually have a question for the two of you as well. Something, Bern, you mentioned earlier on, talking about talking about just projects and generally and understanding the project. But have you ever been in a situation where the project being asked isn't clear, or it's not, let's say it's vague, or it seems as though the idea hasn't been fleshed out to the point where you can confidently say, yes, that will take me 2 days or a week or half an hour or whatever it is. Have you encountered this, either of you encountered this scenario, and how do you approach it after you realize that maybe there's not enough information there for you to go with?
I'll just start it off many times. I mean, a lot of the times communications ideas are not, fully cooked. Sometimes they don't come from communications people, and you really got to dig down, because if not, if you don't know what the target is, the objective, or basically what you want, you're going to end up sort of shooting darts at a wall here. And hopefully the first draft is, it's not exactly what I wanted. I wanted to think of something different. So that clear and concise direction is key. It's going to keep you on budget. It's going to allow you to do the job effectively. So you got to have good conversations. You got to have good, clear direction. And if you're not getting it, you got to keep the conversation going. Ask questions. Sometimes people, again, haven't really thought it out, and sometimes they need your input to really help shape it and finish it off as an idea. And that's, again, part of the value you can bring. So you never leave the table or put down the phone unless you got clear direction. That's my view.
You know, I'm a big one for saying, thank you for calling me. That's really interesting. Let me think about it and I'll call you back. And, you know, just sort of taking a bit of pause and, you know, sort of working through all the angles and making a list of questions. There used to be, I don't know whether it's still out there on the internet, a writer in Toronto, his name is Paul Lima, and he had the yes checklist. And it was basically a list of about 30 questions to go through before you know, sign a contract or reach an agreement, to make sure that all of these questions are answered. But that said, there are still times when, you know, it's always learning, right? You're always learning, and every situation is different, and should have asked that question, or how did that happen? So, you know, live and learn, and add that question to your, you know, make your own yes checklist, and add that question to it.
And Allison, don't be afraid to go back. I mean, sometimes,
Absolutely.
to your point, I mean, you know, things come up and the story starts to shift. You do a little bit more work on it, and, you know, hey, I got something good for you here. I think this is a better way to do it. We found a better source, and all kinds of things. So, you know, it's better if you can start, you know, take some time, shape the story, shape the project. Again, bring your value, and get everybody's buy-in, and, you know, then dig in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Oops, sorry, I was muted. We have a long one here. Have you seen changes or adaptations to the need for more social media, and how the number of, quote, citizen journalists, end quote, affect your value? The idea that everyone thinks they can write, or increasing the number of options for editors and companies. Do you have formal contracts? Oh wait, I might be confusing two different things. Let's break that down. Let's start with the need for more social media and how the number of citizen journalists affect your value. Do you find that that does affect your value? The prevalence of social media, or the demand for having that as part of your structure?
You want to start that one off, Allison?
Yeah, I haven't really been impacted much by that. I get a lot of requests for to work with new writers, and I am really bad at answering emails, so I should be better at answering email, and probably don't follow up on those. It's I hope nobody takes it personally. So, you know, I mean, I'll work with anyone once and accept those stories from them, and we'll see how it goes, you know, and see what the relationship. I know I've had writers drop me. So, you know, and if it's not working for us, it's not working for us. So it's two-way street, right? But I haven't been impacted by social media now.
No, I don't think I've been impacted by citizen journalists. I mean, I think we have the opportunity, and what I do, whether it's Real Agriculture, for example, I go places, I'm there, you know, I'm talking to people, and I think that lends credibility and insight to what I do and what we do. And when it comes to working with corporate clients, you know, I don't think, you know, blog writers, for example, have any impact on my abilities to sort of have a specific technical conversation within a sector of this industry. So I think it may be more of a consumer thing from that perspective. And sorry, social media, I do, one of the things I do is you know, we're all active on social media, and part of what I do is I want to sort of use social media to get my story out there, you know, get some eyeballs on it. So I certainly do, whenever I do stories, especially with Real Agriculture, I contribute social media wise, tweets, Facebook, and other things to sort of, you know, to give the story some legs. And as I say, with a big Twitter account and followers and big Facebook followers, you want to use those to get more eyeballs and take your story places.
So in general, though, you do find that is, at least for your own brand, is more of an asset than anything. Yeah,
I mean, I think so. You know, social media an interesting place. But you know, it offers opportunity, and to, as I say, from giving legs to story, or you know, building your profile, and you know, telling people where you are, what you're doing. I think you know, and you're talking to the industry. You know, a lot of people really don't care where I am or what I'm doing, but there's a lot of people who, you know, within the trade that you know, it's good to let them know what you're doing and where you are, because again, that's builds your brand, and you know, lets people understand that you, as I say, you go places, you're in the know, and you can probably help them out if the need arises.
Okay. Now, what about contracts? So I know contracts, or I mean, even if you're submitting a cost proposal or something like that, what do you put in a contract? What do you use them? If you are making them and you are in fact making use of them, what do you put in them? Or is it preferable just to have a handshake agreement? Like, there's a lot of stuff that you could put in there that might be a safeguard, or maybe if you think it's a safeguard, but they're actually kind of irrelevant. Like, there's a lot of nuances there. So what's your preferred strategy and why?
Always have a contract. It may not necessarily need to be a, you know, 10-page, you know, legal signed by lawyers. What Trudy and I have moved to with Cultivating Communications is, for smaller projects, is more like a letter of agreement. And you know, these are your expectations, and these are the deliverables, and this is the price. You know, obviously with larger contracts and larger projects, then yeah, we do have contracts, and yeah, but yes, always have a contract.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that. I mean, you know, some of my clients I have good working relationships with them, but you know, contracts are highly valuable.
Any absolute must include piece in those things that whether you would miss it or not, but something that absolutely should be in there?
Well, I mean, like some of the agreements I have, you know, they have rates and rate structures and stuff like that. They have, you know, terms of payment agreement and stuff like that, you know, whether it's 30 days or 60 days. So, you know, those type of things are nice to have, obviously, in a contract.
Watch your copyright. Make sure if you're selling a story, you know what the copyright is that you're licensing. That's like a whole other webinar. But you know, even down to you know, your moral rights, because there are contracts that want to buy your moral rights with what they're paying you for your story.
Can you just elaborate on what you mean by that?
Well, it's making sure that the content is not reused in a way that is what you're morally against. So I don't know. I could the easiest example that comes to mind, and I'm not on either side, but well, like if I write something about organic food and it could be taken apart and used in, you know, a non-GMO publication or beside an ad or something like that. So you know, that needs to be just, if they purchase all rights, or if you license all rights, including moral rights, then they can basically do whatever they want with that content, and you don't have any say over that. So that's the danger. So that's the watch for.
So in other words, if you're gonna deal with that amount of danger, price it into
yeah,
the amount you're asking.
Don't sell your morality. So, but also, you know, like moral rights aside, you know, there are publications who want all rights for your story, and for in the future, for technology currently in use and yet to be invented. You know, and you know, if you write something that's that awesome, like that's great, you should continue to be paid for that. But so, you know, you can you could sell first time rights, you could sell exclusive rights, you could, you know, there's a whole variety of different copyright scenarios that you can sell. Just, you know, be mindful of that, and be mindful of what you are being paid for. And all of the rights that you license, you should be paid for that.
Okay, cool. Well, talking about paid, what form of payment is the one that you like to use? What do you see most often? The question is, Bern said that checks can be harder to create. There's other options, credit card, PayPal, that sort of thing. Is there any trend or easier, I guess from the editorial side, is there a preferred method?
Well, I'm a fan of direct deposit.
Yep.
So,
Aren't we all?
yeah. You know, checks and direct deposit are what I see still most commonly. I really, as far as paying my writers, I have a checkbook someplace, and I'll do that if I have to, but I really prefer to do direct deposit because I'm trying to do the paperwork and the editing and you know, that sort of thing, and it's just easier for me to do direct deposit.
Yeah, pretty much the same here. I get some direct deposit, and I still get a lot of checks. I'm always surprised by that. Still get a lot of checks. But either or, and you know, either or works. And I just say, I've seen more and more direct deposit.
Okay, cool. Kind of building on that a little bit. I mean, with the amount of different media outlets out there, do you notice that bloggers or aggregators, other papers, etc., might be taking published content and using it without compensation? Let's say you use somebody as a source for an article, and then they ask if they can share it. Do you find that happening frequently, more frequently, less frequently? Is there any way you can kind of protect yourself against your stuff being used with people that you haven't given the rights to use it to?
Well, it all depends. I mean, I'll just speak a little bit about real agriculture. Part of real agricultural success is the social media aspect of it, is the sharing, is getting more eyeballs. I mean, like 44,000 Twitter followers, 23,000 Facebook followers. So, you know, you want people to share, and, you know, you don't want them to steal it and reprint it and do other things. But, you know, in a social sharing perspective, you know, some organizations are building their business, or it's a big part of their business. So that's one thing. You know, I haven't seen it, you know, as much as good a writer as I think I am. No one's stealing my stuff, or, you know, not a lot of people are stealing my stuff, shall we say. So I don't see a lot of that. Allison?
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are some of my writers who have encountered that. And it's the, you know, there's that common misconception that if a story is on the internet, then it's, and you can do, anybody can reuse it. And that's not the way it is. It goes back to the copyright and what has been licensed to the original publication. So that it's a problem. And, you know, I know there have been situations where writers have invoiced publications for significant amounts in order, because work has been stolen, and they've reached an agreement with that publication for compensation. So yeah, I like the analogy of just because I leave my bicycle outside leaning up against my house doesn't mean that somebody can come along and take it and use it, and it's still my bike, you know? So if you want to use it, I might rent it to you. But, you know, and it's the same with content on the internet. Just because it's there doesn't mean it's free for the taking. And you can rent it, but it's not yours. So it's an ongoing problem.
Okay. So I just have a couple other general questions right here. Is I guess if you're okay with sharing, any mistake that you've made that you would like other people to be aware of, whether it's a commonly occurring one that you see, or something that you really thought, I didn't think about that, and ended up being a problem. whether it be a contract or let's say you approached a piece incorrectly, something like that?
We're kind of perfect, aren't we?
The only thing I would say is, understanding the process. Sometimes,
Yeah.
you think you understand how things are supposed to work with a client or with a job and stuff like that, and it kind of gets away from you. The story, you submit it, and they run with it, and you didn't get a chance to sort of vet it properly. You probably didn't. You probably wanted to go back and check some things, and it got away from you, and they got published. So just trying to maintain control, understanding the process. And I think the most frustration I've ever had is when stories get away from you, and or you don't get a chance to do it the way you think it should be done, or you were asked to do it because people have either willingly or unwillingly taking it out of your hands. So that's I think probably the most frustrating thing for me.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think of misunderstanding deadlines or here we want you to write this and this is your deadline, and then it might be a whole pile of stories or something like that, and then I don't get the information until like a week before it's all due, and it's like, what? I can't, I gave you my price based on having 2 months to write this, so that sort of thing. But it's you know what, every mistake is a learning opportunity, and you won't make it again the next time. So
well, that's the idea anyway.
And that's always a key one is the deadline. I mean, like you have these conversations and you want it tomorrow or next week or whatever, and then to your point, I mean, the information doesn't come, and then it becomes a struggle to do the job and do good writing. So if you can grab a hold of the situation, and if you have people who do that, you need to manage them as best you can.
Yeah.
Okay, what about pitching stories? That's a big part of farm writing in general. What information do you always make sure that you have or you want from a pitch?
Read the publication. Be familiar with the publication. Be familiar with the stories from the last few months, and be familiar with it. I think a good plan is to write maybe the first paragraph or two of the story, and go in with your pitch that way. Write the first 2 paragraphs and then say, would you be interested in a story on this? I also don't want writers to put way too much time in on a pitch, because I don't want you to waste your time. I need to know enough about the story to know whether or not that it would I want to proceed with it or accept it, but I also don't want you to spend 3 hours writing a pitch to me either. So
yeah, no, I was going to say I don't do a lot of pitching, but I used to do a lot of it in PR. And to your point, Allison, you want to know that publication, you want to know what they're interested in, what they've covered, what they typically cover, the angles they take, and look for stories that match up and sort of meet that editorial content. And write a good pitch, and a lot of times that pitch is just enough of the story to sort of to wet the whistle, wet that appetite, but again, you can't go ahead and write the story because you can't make that work either. So just got to find it, but have an interesting story, make sure it fits, and do enough work to get it sold.
All right. At this point, I would like to invite folks that are not doing this via computer, but via phone, if they can have a question they'd like to ask, please feel free to caller number 1. We're an all-knowing group. All right. I've unmuted as many participants as I can. Let's see here. All right, well, guess in the meantime, maybe we can go back to travel just for a minute, folks. Is in terms of travel, anything you've noticed that comes up, or I shouldn't say comes up, but how do you manage travel expectations? So you've talked about having a travel rate, but beyond that, is there anything that you've encountered where maybe an editor doesn't understand how long it takes to get to a place, or how long it's like trying to communicate the time commitment?
I mean, from my perspective, I really haven't had a lot of any issues with that over the years. I mean, you know, you have to understand that, you know, if you're on the road, you're going to an annual meeting or convention, you know, you're going to a trade show or something like that, and there's hotels involved and staying overnight and eating, you know, you have to understand the parameters and have those conversations, you know, what the rates are and what's expected, what's billable. And, you know, I really haven't had any issues of people saying, hey, I'm not going to pay that, because I've had those conversations up front. So, you know, I don't overdo it. No filet mignon for supper, and stuff like that. But, you know, just my approach is, you know, eat healthy, eat well, and just live within the means of your relationship.
I don't have a lot of travel situations for my writers. Most of it is done by phone or even email interviews. So it's not like expenses are pretty minimal. I don't, unless it was something really unusual, and something that I mean, if you see that you are going to incur expenses and that's not something you have discussed with your editor, let your editor know before you incur the expenses, or you could be, you know, out of luck. Certainly, you know, I mean, I don't pay for phone calls. I used to. There when I first started freelancing, I had a notebook on my table or on my desk, and I would write down every long distance phone call that I made. And then when the phone bill came in every month, I would go through it with a highlighter and pick out my long distance phone calls and bill the publication for that. But there's no need for that now, right? With cell phones and Canada-wide calling and everything, so we don't really need that.
I mean, for me, I mean, like, there's technical abilities, whether it's phone or internet, and, you know, share, you know, file sharing programs and stuff like that you need to do business. So, I mean, for me, I mean, that's pretty much factored in my rate. That's my cost of doing business. So I've got to have that embedded in my rate. That's where I put that stuff. You know, those extra expenses of driving places and hotels and foods and stuff like that. That'd be extra.
Okay, well, I have another question here for you, but before I ask that, just like to ask again if there's anyone connecting over the phone, if there's a question they have or they'd like to ask first. 3, 2, 1. All right. One thing we didn't talk about too much, and Bern, I know you do a lot of video work. Allison, I'm not sure if videos makes up a significant part of what you do. But how do you approach different types of media? I mean, we all might be writers for the most part, but that's only one form of media. So let's say video, how do you approach that? How do you factor that into like your time cost, or how do you sell a video? If it's 5 minutes long, what's that worth?
I mean, I don't do a whole lot of it different. I mean, the stuff I do for Real Agriculture, I do a lot of video, but that's all embedded in what I do. So whether I'm typing out a post or talking to someone in front of a camera, it's pretty much all what I do. When I do other videos, you know, I just cost it out. I mean, anybody who's doing video, they'll basically cost out at a day or a half day rate, and contract themselves out in that way. And then the post production, if you're doing that, and that's gonna be rated out as well. And sometimes that's hourly. But, you know, it really doesn't change. I mean, some people have a higher rate because, hey, I'm touting a camera, I'm touting equipment to do the job. You know, I'm producing, you know, footage and stuff like that, and they may price it out differently than actually writing a story. So, you know, that's sometimes the change, but I just think you got to figure out what works for you. And the thing about it is, you know, when we're writing stories, we can make a phone call, and we can be working on different stories and a lot of different things. Sometimes when you're doing the camera, we're doing a video shoot, you got to go to that exact place, be there. You know, that is the what's required for the job. So you got to price that into quite often is a day rate and various other things. And again, you got to have the right gear. So that's got to add to your rate. You know, sometimes when I'm doing a story, if I have a phone and a computer, I don't need a whole lot else. So you got to factor in all the equipment that you need to make a video, and you know, build a rate around all that requirements.
Allison, any perspective on your end?
Yeah, I don't do any video work, so yeah,
All right.
nothing to add. Thanks.
All right, well, I'll just open up one more time if there's any further questions. Otherwise, I think we're getting close to the end here, folks.
Can I just add that, you know, when you're a good writer, you're really valuable to your editor. You know, and just all of the things that we've talked about how to sell a story and how to write a pitch and how your writing should be, that is hugely valuable. And if you're doing good work and you're got a good relationship with your editor, if you're doing good work, you're really valuable to your editor, and you'll keep getting work from that editor. So that's I really value my writers who I can you know, count on and have that. I know they do good stuff, and I'll keep calling them back.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. I mean, when I started my presentation, I did, you know, we started this thing off with, you know, experience, knowledge, skills. I'll throw in reliability and all those things. It all adds up to value. And as a freelancer, create your value, know your value, find people who value your value, and work with them, build relationships with editors. And, you know, if you do good stuff, they'll see it, and you'll be able to sort of, as I say, build some good relationships and, you know, build a business.
Well, all right, comrades. I guess that kind of brings us to the end here. I hope there is some enjoyable information in there for everybody. And thanks again, Bern and Allison. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Until
Thanks,
next
yeah.
time.
Okay,
Thanks, everybody.
cheers. Bye.
Cheers.